What's the best long con you ever pulled?
Story 1. If my girlfriend and I want to do different things, we settle it like adults should. Via thumb wrestle war. She wins about 50 of the time, and thinks it is a fair game. Her hands are tiny and her thumbs are weak. She has never won on a single match where I cared about the outcome. We haven't had to go to second Thanksgiving for the last 5 years. Story 2. Hey Race 1. In 2006, Reddit was sold to Condé Nast. It was soon obvious to many that the sale had been premature. The site was unmanaged and under-resourced under the old media giant who simply didn't understand it and could never realize its full potential. So the founders and their allies in Y Combinator, where Reddit had been born, hatched an audacious plan to re-extract Reddit from the clutches of the 100-year-old media conglomerate. Together with Sam Altman, they recruited a young up-and-coming technology manager with social media credentials. Alexis, who was on the interview panel for the new Reddit CEO, would reject all other candidates except this one. The manager was to insist as a condition of taking the job that Condé Nast would have to give up significant ownership of the company, first to employees by justifying the need for equity to be able to hire top talent, bringing in Silicon Valley insiders to help run the company. After continuing to grow the company, he would then further dilute Condé Nast's ownership by raising money from a syndicate of Silicon Valley investors led by Sam Altman, now the president of Y Combinator itself, who in the process would take a seat on the board. Once this was done, he and his team would manufacture a series of otherwise improbable leadership crises, forcing the new board to scramble to find a new CEO, allowing Altman to use his position on the board to advocate for the reintroduction of the old founders, installing them on the board and as CEO, thus returning the company to their control and relegating Condé Nast to a position as minority shareholder. Just kidding, there's no way that could happen. Story 3. When I was in high school, I, for whatever reason, desperately wanted glasses. I felt like I would look fantastic in them, and I didn't want to be some hipster emo that got lensless glasses for fashion's sake, despite the fact that in the end I was no better than them and was probably worse. I took the time to develop the symptoms twice every week, mentioning to my parents how I got headaches from reading the chalkboard or from reading books, feigning incompetence when asked to read questions, answers, or passages while in class. It got to the point where I actually deluded myself through my own routine to think that I actually did need glasses. The eye exam eventually came, and I delicately lied my way through the procedure. I picked the lens options that were the least offensive to my 20/20 vision, and went off with my prescription. I got my glasses, picked the lens that I had really been wanting to wear for years, which was the whole point of it all, and went on my way. I wore them for a couple years despite my headaches and inability to see properly, and people complimented me on my glasses. Life was grand. Then I got some sense and took them off and have never touched them again. God, I was a narcissistic as a teenager. Story 4. Convincing my hot, intelligent fiancé to marry me. Hasn't yet figured out I'm a good for nothing yet, okay? So I used to date a girl long distance. We met online. She lived in NYC and I'm from the UK. I arranged a trip to meet up and hang out with her. Flew out, had a lot of fun. On maybe the second day of the 2-week trip, I saw a Union flag and saluted. I thought it'd be funny to do this. My girlfriend turns to me and says, "WTYD, you salute." And in a flash of inspiration, I say it's a silly old law in the UK that if you see a Union Jack flag, you have to salute. It's one of those weird laws that nobody really sticks to, but I guess technically you could be fined for it. She nods and tells me it's funny that I stick to a stupid law like that, and we laugh about it. I keep this going for the entire rest of the trip. I salute whenever we pass a hotel flying the Union flag. We laugh about it, but I just say it's a habit at this point. The trip comes to the end, I cry a lot and then go home. Maybe 3 months later, I'm sitting eating dinner and she messages me something along the lines of, "Oh my god, I hate you, I just mentioned that dumb flag law and everybody laughed at me." It's not the longest long con, but I still get a kick out of it because I'd forgotten right up until receiving that text. Story 5. Did you know there's a condition where your body can be so efficient that you can eat whatever you want and you'll never? There's no such condition, though, not that I know of anyways. Maybe there is, and there's super efficient humans amongst us. In college, one of my friends made a comment that he's never seen me go into the bathroom stalls. Instead of calling him out on tracking my bathroom schedule, I told him, as a joke, I have the aforementioned no pooping condition. Maybe my delivery was that good, or maybe he's an idiot, but I realized immediately he believed. He believed that I have never pooped in my entire life, no ever. Fast forward 4 years later, we're on road trip. I had some bojangles that was bojanglin in my stomach and needed to take a dump. I broke character. As soon as I came back in the car, "Holy, did you just take a dump? Congrats, man." Story 6. My dad is good at these. Turns out, we used to rent the cabin in our backyard, and there was a girl in her late teens living there when I was a baby. She was always there to lend a hand to help raise me, and was for all intents and purposes my big sister. She's also responsible for all of the pets I had growing up. She brought a puppy home once, and we ended up keeping him, golden retriever. We name him Fred, so my dad takes Fred to the vet to get him neutered, and on the way home swings by the grocery store and picks up a can of diced tomatoes. He gets on his computer, this is 1989, mind you, and whips up a very official-looking fake label that says something like "Fred specimen taken whatever the date." He swaps the can's label for the one he made. He leaves the can on the mantel, doesn't say a word, until one day, my sister sees it and asks, "What's that?" "Oh," he says. "That's from when I took Fred in to get neutered. Turns out if you ask, they'll can him up and let you keep them. she buys it, hook, line, sinker, and since she's the one who brought Fred home to us, she asks if she can have the can. Sure, says Dad. She keeps that can on her own mantle for months. Sometime later she's moved out and gotten her own house and she gets her own puppy, and she takes him in to get neutered, and she asks, edit word. Story 7. When I was in high school, I had a friend who would always look kind of sleepy because he stayed up at night playing video games. Sometimes he would sleep in class. When someone asked about it, we pretended he was a narcoleptic and that they shouldn't bring it up with him, as he was really sensitive about it. A few months later someone else in my high school said had heard this guy was a narcoleptic and asked whether it was true. I said sure. Anyway, my friend went to do medicine at university and became a surgeon. 15 years later, I was visiting my hometown and went to the pub. People were catching up on what different people were doing these days, and I mentioned this guy had become a surgeon. Several people said they couldn't believe they let him do that, seeing as he was a narcoleptic and all. It turned out, the whole school believed it, and some teachers had stopped telling him off for sleeping in lessons, feeling sympathetic to his plight. Story 8. My dad was visiting Germany from USA during the time when the wall in Berlin was coming down. He came home with a chunk of concrete from the wall weighing about 8 pounds and placed it by his fireplace. One day my uncle and I were driving by a Brahms ice cream shop that was being torn down, and I grabbed a similarly sized chunk of concrete from there and swapped it with the one on the mantel, and placed the real one under a guest bed intending to reveal the joke later that day, but forgot. Several months later during a family reunion, I remembered what I had done while he was telling someone about what he thought was the Checkpoint Charlie concrete. When I came clean on the ruse, he told me that he had given samples of the Berlin Wall to some people over the past several months who mounted them on plaques on the wall. Nope, 'twas Brahms ice cream store concrete. My dad kept both chunks of concrete around for a while with a new story to tell. I presume some are still displaying the Brahms samples marked as Berlin Wall to this day, so the con inadvertently continues. Story 9. Not my con, but my grandma's. One day years ago she was out and about in town and noticed her brother's car parked nearby. They were very close, he was nowhere to be found, so she left him a little note, something to the effect of, "Hey, saw your car, sorry I missed you," and signed to the Green Phantom, a reference to their Irish heritage. She figured he would know who it was or it wouldn't amount to much of anything. Well, shortly thereafter, she finds out he's been asking around everywhere trying to figure out who this mysterious Green Phantom is. And nobody knows, so she takes advantage. She starts leaving him more messages on his car, at home, wherever. Then she starts sending him letters in the mail, postcards from distant locations, birthday gifts, and signs them all the Green Phantom. And she gets others involved in it too, so it's not obvious that these messages are all coming from wherever it is that she has traveled. "You're going to France here, take this birthday card with and stick in the mailbox. You're visiting from New Jersey, when you get home, mail this gift to my brother. Would you?" She and everyone kept the secret for years and years, over a decade I believe, and he had no idea it was his own sister. He eventually was diagnosed with cancer and became increasingly ill. On what became clear would be his last birthday, she got decked out in all green including a long green cape, and came to his birthday party as the Green Phantom herself. He was shocked and thrilled at the reveal. He cried, many people cried, I'm sure, wish I could have been there. Story 10. Short answer. Me. My friends and family think I'm a funny, thoughtful, extroverted guy who is fiercely loyal to his loved ones and who works hard for what he achieves. It's all one big fake it till you make it, and everyone seems to be buying it, even me. I think the old adage of you become what you pretend to be is incredibly true, and am its poster child. One day an incredibly dull, shallow, lazy introvert 12-year-old sat down and imagined the kind of person he should be, in vivid detail, and then just started telling people that's who he was. Not even doing it at first, just telling people I'd go out once a month at best and say stuff like, "Oh, I'm the kind of person that hates staying in the house. I'd have hardly any friends who gave about me," and say my friends know how I am, you're my friend for life. They'll go to bat for you at a moment's notice. I'd play video games for 2 weeks straight and drop stuff like a day without new experiences is a day wasted. In my book, all complete bullshit. What friends, what experiences. After a while of feeling like a fraud I started doing it to back up what I was saying. For show, so I'd get more opportunities to talk myself, more truth to add to the bullshit. Slowly but surely, over years and years, it's become less bullshit and more sincere. I really have become that person. I really have stuck by my friends time and time again. At first because I said that's the kind of person I was, and now because that is the kind of person I am. I really do keep constantly on the go. I really did learn to relish pushing my limits and my comfort zone. I'm closer to being that guy I imagined I should be when I was a kid than I would have ever dreamed possible. And it all happened through falsehood and facades. TLDR, conned myself into becoming a good person. Story 11. When I was deployed to Qatar, I lived in a shipping container. Being a junior officer, I had a roommate who happened to be my coworker. One of our many duties was to make life easier on the senior officers when they came in. At that time, early 2003, most of them were doing double duty at Tampa and Qatar. We had this one reserve Colonel 06 who was doing a lot of traveling all over the AOR and would stop into Qatar at least 1 week a month. Colonels got an entire shipping container to themselves. My buddy and I convinced the NCO in charge of the rooms to let us just keep the room for Colonel Smith. No kidding. That was his name because he rarely gave us more than a few hours notice that he was coming, and he was really cranky. Not 2 weeks later, Colonel Smith's reserve orders get cancelled and he was gone. The last thing he does is tell me to out-process him because he has no time. Okay, My buddy roommate moves into Seol Smith's room. We worked about 15 to 18 hours a day, so it was very easy to avoid being seen, but we had already conditioned some folks that one of us would live in there if Seol Smith was away. We then created this entire life for Seol Smith. Djibouti 1 week, Uzbekistan the next. We would occasionally go to the NCO to ask if he could fix something that the colonel had complained about, all the while giving him the "oh, you just missed him and be glad you missed him. He is in a mean mood." To keep our stories straight, we had a tracking board in our office that had where he had last been, where he was now, and where he was going next, along with when we expected him back in Qatar. We actually got compliments for being so dedicated to tracking personnel in the AOR, which was an issue at the time. About 2 months into this, our actual boss came out from Tampa for a few weeks and things had gotten really crowded, so he had been given a roommate. His roommate sucked and was driving him crazy, which made life for us. My buddy quickly moved out of and sanitized Seol Smith's room, and we moved our boss in there. He started to ask questions, and I told him he really didn't want to know. We made the point of having the NCO in charge of rooms see an actual colonel in the room. 2 weeks later the boss left and my buddy moved back in. 6 months after that my buddy and I redeployed back to Tampa. Our replacements were completely briefed on Seol Smith, including his entire history in the AOR, his personal pet peeves, and even some of his backstory in the army. All of it made up. For all I know, he still has a room in Qatar, though he should have been promoted a few times by now. Story 12. I was just your typical 13-year-old greedy RuneScape player. Times were tough in the beginning. Couldn't scrape together 2 gold pieces. I couldn't, so one day I hatched a plan. A plan to change my in-game gender to a girl. A plan to go down to the middle of the fair city of Falador and ask for, well, one day there he was. The poor sap that would lay my golden egg, Eiley. I would type passionately. Eiley too, he would whisper back in keystrokes. It wasn't long before I had all the rune armor I could ever want, all the gold I'd ever need. But the ruse could not last. 6 months later, I brought him back to our fated meeting place for our anniversary. Dragged him into a local tavern and up the stairs for a special surprise. Then when I had him vulnerable, I told him actually a guy I'll never saw that poor, sweet man again. Story 13. I'm not sure what is considered long, but when I was in high school, I knew a guy who worked at the local Applebee's. He was a manager. Anyway, he introduced my dad and I to our server, who was from South Carolina and had a bright red beard and jet black hair. A year later, some friends and I went to Applebee's during school hours because we'd been drafted to talk to kids about how we never use drugs. Anyway, we had the black-haired red beard server. He takes our orders and leaves. I say, so guys, did you know that a certain group of Scotsmen immigrated to South Carolina in the 18th century? They carried a gene for having a red beard and black hair. I bet you guys my dinner that he's from South Carolina. Everyone took the bet, but they were too awkward to ask him. Finally, toward the end of the meal, some look at the server and said, "Are you from South Carolina?" And he said, yes I am. They pitched in for my meal, and I didn't tell them until I was in college. Story 14. For years I've been telling people that I will gladly pay them on Tuesday for a hamburger today, but I never said which Tuesday, suckers, every time. Story 15. 7 years ago, I changed my coworker's signature. Still hasn't noticed. I still giggle when I see it. He jumped on those "be green, don't print this" bullshit signatures, but was so lazy, he didn't copy the entire thing. It just ended mid-sentence. I added blah 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 at the end of it. 7 years. Story 16. I'm not sure if this is considered a con, but when I'm meeting someone for the first time, I like to get partially stoned beforehand. That way, they think my stoned self is my sober self, and I can be stoned whenever I want. Works out, man. Edit, you caught me, Yulangastries. I usually do go big. Story 17. My BFF parents and mine were like Hatfield's McCoys. We were not allowed to be friends solely because of that. We hid our friendship for 11 years until I was 16. We told her parents I was a foreign exchange student from Sweden. We pulled that off for 2 years until my picture was published in the newspaper for honor roll, and they caught us. They did say they couldn't be too mad because how bad could I be if I was being honored in the newspaper? That was the longest con I ever pulled. Story 18. Not as much a long con as a long revenge. Someone spoiled the Captain America storyline for me like 3 years ago. She's a big Bucky fan, so it was bound to happen. I was extremely pissed. So when X-Men Days of Future Past came out, I watched it midnight premiere when I knew she couldn't, then I came home and spoiled the whole thing for her. I waited 2 years for it. Felt so good. Story 19. I successfully convinced many people that I don't believe in owls. I point to their freaky ability to swivel their heads and how many mechanical owls are used in movies. I can go on for hours. So at 52, I continue to keep this up. Story 20. I started dating my boss in secret, which is the worst idea ever. She cheated on me with 2 guys, both of whom I knew. When they found out we'd been an item, one of them apologized immediately and said he'd never have gone there had he known. The other one didn't. He just avoided me whilst still liking my posts on Facebook. Bizarrely, whilst talking up how he'd my ex, which kept getting back to me from people who'd heard no honor or respect from a guy I'd previously liked. A year later, this guy is in a relationship. I'm living with a friend who has the ability to pick up women very easily despite looking like some sort of ogre-type creature. I notice an attraction between my friend and guy's girlfriend, so for the next 2 months I keep dropping subtle hints to my friend that he should go for it. Any interest he has in other girls I shoot down and keep him focused on guy's girlfriend. 95 of conversations become about his next move with guy's girlfriend. Guy's girlfriend eventually fell in love with my friend. Moved in with him and dumped Guy. Guy had to see the pair of them every day at work. Didn't make me feel good. Only confirmed that I can pull off ridiculous feats when I really put my mind to it. Story 21. My whole family is convinced that I hate drinking tea. For context, I'm from one of the biggest tea drinking nations in the world. In reality, I love it. I just hate making tea because if you're caught, you've to make a cup for the whole house. I'm a secret tea drinker. Story 22. This is going to sound really dumb, but that's only because it's really dumb. It also doesn't deserve to be so long, but let's pretend I did it on purpose to emphasize how long I spent torturing myself for some English class. When I was in elementary school, everyone had to learn an instrument for 3 years. I chose the trumpet, but after a year I wanted to switch to the trombone. Nope, arms are too short to hit all the notes, so instead I got the baritone, which is a large, heavy brass cauldron hammered into an excuse for a musical instrument, like the tuba's lesser-known and lesser-desired brother. Somehow my sticks for arms carried it around for 2 years, but the real problem was the music. I only knew how to read trumpet music. Baritones was easy enough, only a few steps down, but when you're playing on the fly it's easy to get mixed up. At first I got away with using my old trumpet music sheets, but every class my teacher would walk around and listen to you play on your own. Those few minutes were terrifying because I was always afraid he'd see my trumpet music book and blow up at me on the back of the book. His side, it said trumpet across the top in little white letters. He was very strict, very easy to anger, and worked with kids constantly up. To be fair, he was nice if you tried, but he was a very intimidating man, so I was too embarrassed to admit a few months in that I only knew trumpet music and ask for a baritone book. Back then I was very much a if I fail in school I fail at life kid. Eventually I couldn't bear the stress, so I stole a trombone book close enough from the lost and found and changed all of the notes with whiteout and pen to make it trumpet music, so from the back it was trombone music, but from my side it was heaven. My teacher only looked at the actual music if you up, so it was just more encouragement to practice. The trombone guy next to me was baffled, and one time he forgot his music and my teacher told him to use mine, but before he could say I don't know what this is, my teacher decided not bringing your own music meant you should sit out all class. He never threw chairs at us, but I think he wanted to once or twice. The next summer I just learned how to play baritone music, but I still went a year with this thing. Story 23. My mother believes that I'm not good at lying because I have allowed her to catch me lying about several small things over the years. Truth is I'm an exceptionally good liar. Story 24. My friend and I tricked this kid in our class that we were brothers, despite the fact that we didn't look like each other, had different last names, lived in different houses. No one else indicated we were at all related. When it was brought up, other people just laughed loads, then either said no they're not brothers or awkwardly agreed that we were brothers. Basically it must have been pretty confusing for him, but he eventually settled on the conclusion that we were brothers. He was foreign, so that might have contributed to extra confusion through minor language barriers. Maybe, I don't know. Eventually, on the last day of school ever before college 6th form, we told him we weren't actually brothers. Dude was massively shocked, and actually a bit upset judging by his expression. It was a lie that lasted 5 years, that was done for absolutely no reason, completely on a whim. Story 25. My sisters and I went to boarding schools in the same city. 1 year after vacation, we pretended that my younger sister had had an accident, and was amnesiac. She couldn't remember anything about her first term at the school. So for several weeks, my sister was being reintroduced to classmates and teachers, and being helpfully shown around the school. I'm amazed the teachers never got any confirmation from my parents. Story 26. This is the best long con pulled on me because I'm not patient enough to pull off a long con. One of my best friends in high school, John, and I used to hang out at his house once a week or so for about 3 years. Sometimes his 3 brothers or one of his parents would be around, but usually we'd be in his room. On my first visit over, he laughs and is like, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, my dog's name is Amanda, my first name," kind of funny and a little weird, because I have a common female name, but whatever. He just took pleasure in calling the dog's name when I was over and saying the dog's name a lot. This went on for about 3 years. One day we were in his living room with his entire family, and being the dog lover that I am, I called Amanda over to me. I see his mom shoot me a weird look, then shoot his dad a weird look. After it became obvious to them that I was calling the dog over, she finally asked me why I was calling Fido Amanda. She then looked at John, who immediately began heaving in laughter. For 3 years, I'd been calling their male dog by my first name. After it came out, they told me they thought they noticed it before, but just thought I was trying to be weird or funny. I still don't know how John never broke in those 3 years, but I have to give him credit. TLDR, I called my friend's dog by my first name in front of my friend and his family for 3 years. Story 27. I made up a guy I called Ricky. I told my friends I met him at this community service-like program I have to do. He was a recovering heroin addict with occasional relapses. Whenever my friends would hit me up to hang out and I was busy, I would tell them I was with Ricky. If they wanted to do something on a later date and I had stuff to do already, I told them I had plans with Ricky. It soon became this passion, this inside joke only I knew about and could laugh about to myself. I started off-handedly mentioning heroin every now and then and would be sure I name-dropped Ricky in a sentence shortly before or after it. Eventually there was a kinda sorta impromptu intervention where I mentioned Ricky and my friends just let out their feelings of how they never met this guy, but they didn't like him, and how I shouldn't be hanging out with this guy that does heroin, and how they were upset I've been blowing them off for him. One of them was really upset because I had told him I had already seen the new Avengers with Ricky and I didn't invite him. It took some convincing, but they know how I joke and we all laughed about it in the end. Now whenever I say something that I plan on doing they ask, "This isn't another Ricky, is it?" All in all it lasted about 1 to 2 months. TLDR, I made up a guy I would hang out with, who did heroin, as a joke to off my friends. Story 28. When I started high school, I wanted to mess with some of the popular kids in my elective classes who were a grade higher than me. I pretended that I didn't talk, not impeded physiologically, just that I didn't do talking. A couple of them would try to talk to me, but I would just murmur or whisper that I don't talk. "Hey kidlo, cool pin. Where'd you get it?" I made it, and then I would be silent the rest of the day around them. I would just nod or shake my head or point at things if they asked. I had to do a group presentation once, and I remember them leaning over in their chairs to hear me speak because many had never heard me talk before. I kept it short and quick. This little bit ran on until they all graduated. Funny enough though, I am quite the opposite and would talk up a storm, especially if those specific kids weren't around. One day I got a detention because I would just not shut the up. I had to stay after school about an hour. One of the kids in that group walked by and saw me. "Kidlo, are you in detention?" I nodded my head. "For what?" I would then mouth the word talking and he left so very confused. Story 29. Not entirely sure how it happened, but I just got a raise and told that I do excellent work while spending my days browsing Reddit. Granted it made me feel bad, so I actually got a lot done yesterday and this morning. Maybe they conned me. Story 30. Probably late, but after a fight about the names of our second son, I start pushing to name it Tobias Solo in Spanish as alone. Of course my wife never was going to let that happen, but still I fight about it, and lost. So I start with my plan. Every single time I was alone with him I tell him he was called Tobias Solo. His brother 5 years bigger helped me because he's named like Han Solo. That's awesome. So 2 months ago, he was playing with my wife and she asked what was his name, in which he replayed Tobias Solo. She wasn't happy with me. Sorry for the bad English. Story 31. This is late, but oh well. My great-grandmother hated the idea of having to get glasses, so she memorized the eye chart you'd see at the eye doctor. For years she'd go in and rattle off the letters all the way down and impress the doctor. Till one year she came in and rattled off the letters and the eye doctor looked amazed and then told her that's impressive, but that was our old chart. We have a new one now, can you read it? She was pissed. She tried to get my grandmother at kid at that time to go in and write down all the letters so she could memorize that chart. She wouldn't do it. But as the story goes, my great-grandmother pulled that con off for years. Story 32. Throw away because reasons. My entire professional career up to this point has been a lie and mostly bullshit, deception, manipulation, and some really stupid luck. Explanation: I passionately hate school. I hate everything about it. Obtaining an associate's degree was miserable as I couldn't focus or concentrate. Later diagnosed with ADD amongst other things, but that is beside the point. I finally scraped by and made it to my last semester, but realized I was one class short. I approached the head of my department and requested I take an independent study. All in all I took 22 credit hours worth of classes that semester. I procrastinated for the better half of the semester because I'm stupid and had addiction problems and no motivation confidence. When the looming nightmare of a mountain of I had to do could not be tolerated anymore, I found teachers' editions of books for the classes I took online and filled in all the answers. I had another class that was nothing but labs and I wouldn't have the slightest clue what they are talking about or how to even start to get an answer. A student had dropped out a few weeks before finals but left his lab book. I stole it, copied all his work that took hours upon hours to finish in about 20 minutes, then threw his away in a dumpster. I had to write a 10-page report on my independent study. I just pulled up the book online affiliated with my lab's book and copied and pasted lessons but changed up the formatting and wording of it. I received an associate's in electronic engineering based on a bunch of lies and dishonesty. Teachers and family praised me for my hard work and determination, and how well I managed to take on so much all at once. I genuinely enjoyed what I was doing till about halfway through the program, and I lost interest quickly but didn't have the means to change my mind, so I was just stuck doing it. That web of bullshit landed me a great paid internship that they even let me choose what I was interested in. I chose IT. When I first started working there was no clocking in or out or any way that I was really tracked when I was or wasn't there. It was for a larger organization, and I soon got ballsy enough to realize I could just leave whenever I wanted to for extended periods of time under the guise that everyone would just shrug and assume I was helping someone else. I sat separate from the help desk in a corner by myself, and if there was nothing going on I would go hang out at a friend's apartment that lived nearby and drink beer and play video games for a couple of hours, then go back to work, sit back at my desk, and no one ever seemed to notice. At the end of my internship I was praised with doing an amazing job and how helpful I was and how much I will be missed. One of the higher-ups even wrote me a personal letter of thanks and said I could use him as a reference on my resume. That internship eventually got me to my current job working in IT. I actually love my job and work very hard at it now. I just received a promotion and a huge raise recently. I am genuinely passionate about what I do now and can without lying say I like my job and most of the people I work with as well. It is just very strange and somewhat cringy to look back and reflect on how things came to be for me. TLDR bullshitted my way into a prosperous career I love and enjoy. Story 33. About 3 years ago, I had an internship at this small dental marketing agency. One of the things they had me do was post reviews on Yelp, so I had set up a couple of different email accounts. I didn't feel good about it, but I really needed the experience on my resume, so I did it. Anyway, during this time, I found out that I could get an account using a name that was very similar to my best friend's name. The only difference between the two names is that his last name ends in 2ts and this name ends in 2ls, so they kind of look the same at first glance. I thought it was hilarious, so I went to see if I could make a Gmail account under that name, and I could. I went onto up the Twitter handle and made a Facebook under that name and added a few of our friends who were very confused. I don't even use my own Facebook now, but I use that one occasionally to shitpost and annoy my friend. Since then I have been snatching up that name on pretty much every popular social media network. I mainly do this to annoy my friend, but I also see it as a long-term investment. I'm just waiting for the day that someone who actually has that name becomes rich and famous or some fictional character with that name gets popular, and then I can sell them my accounts. Is it a stupid sort of long con? Yes. Will it ever happen? Probably not, but for now I at least some entertainment out of being able to annoy my friend.